So the Absolute Superman comic gives us our most sadistic moment of the story up to this point. And what we're actually going to do here is we're going to kick things off with the epilogue and then jump into the main story, because the epilogue is when the really twisted stuff happens, although the main story is pretty wild. So what this does is this picks up with Lex Luthor in the Absolute Universe. Now, there were a lot of theories that Lex Luthor was like really twisted, dark, messed up in some way. He's not. He's just a regular guy. But Brainiac has been seeking out Lex Luthor because of his level of intelligence and showed up to a great big huge family gathering that Lex Luthor was having with chainsaws on his arms. And then we didn't find out what happened next, right? He just said, let's get to work. What this does is it has Lex Luthor begging for his life, right? And he just says, please stop, right? And Brainiac tells him, yes, I believe that should about do it. And he says, what happens next will be up to you. I do hope you won't squander the work that we've done here today. Seize this opportunity, Lex Luthor, I beg of you. Make yourself interesting until we meet again. And then Brainiac walks away, only for us to find out that the entire family of Lex Luthor has just been taken apart by Brainiac. It's twisted, right? It's really, really twisted. And what I think is kind of crazy here is that it turns out Brainiac is the most twisted person in the entirety of the Absolute Superman comic up to this point. Having said that, let's jump into the main story, because honestly, it's equally as messed up as this segment that we just covered, as crazy as that may be. So one of the things that had happened is that Parasite had been unleashed on the city of Metropolis. But again, this is the Absolute Universe, not the main DC universe, so this is a different version. Now, I do want to specify, within the main DC universe, there are different iterations of Parasite, but far and away, the most popular one is Rudy Jones, if for no other reason than like Superman the Animated Series that so many of us grew up watching. But basically, regardless of which version of Parasite you're talking about in DC, the general gist is all the same. Parasite absorbs individuals' life force, their powers, whatever the case is, even their memories, and then he's able to basically use it as an energy source to satiate his hunger. So for those of you guys coming from Marvel Comics, think of him as some kind of a blend between like Rogue and Galactus, so to speak. But what ends up happening is like everyone is fleeing for their life. And Lois Lane, trying to get a hold of Jimmy Olsen, just says, we have to get out of the city right now. And Jimmy doesn't respond. And she asks, right, Jimmy, can you hear me? And that's when she stumbles across Jimmy Olsen, who's been pulled into the tendrils of Parasite. And literally, Jimmy just begs, right, please kill me, because what he's experiencing here is a fate worse than death. And that's the thing, Lois initially goes to do it and then can't bring herself to do it. So instead she jumps off the dock, but then of course Parasite grabs her anyway. But along the way it starts communicating, right? Us no hunger, us no need, us no more alone, us all together now. And that's where Superman just kind of says, so many screams, I can't focus. Now, that's one thing to keep in mind. Absolute Superman is relatively new to all this, so he hasn't quite learned the skill set of the traditional Superman, and being able to figure out how to basically ignore these different screams and focus in on individual things. But lest we forget, Hawkman Carter Hall is still here, and Hawkman works basically for the Absolute Justice League, right? He's kind of like their guy who goes out and carries out their campaigns, whatever they happen to be. But he's effectively a henchman, for lack of a better word, right? And that's where he tells Superman, it's not rocket science, kid. Focus on the giant monster and take this thing out. Now, Superman tells him, right, the infection is spreading in every direction at once, and it looks to be growing roughly 4 square miles a minute. In less than an hour, every living thing in Metropolis will have been absorbed. And when he says every living thing, he means every living thing. Humans, animals, the whole 9 yards. And that's where Hawkman just tells him, in less than an hour, we'll just be drinking beers over this thing's big, ugly corpse. So follow my lead. And he just races off, right? Now, one of the cool things about this is that, again, while Absolute Superman is in some ways figuring himself out, he's also becoming the Superman that he knows, which is to say, he's not reckless because he doesn't know what it means to destroy Parasite, right? And that's one of the things that happens is that Superman tells Hawkman, these people are not dead. And Carter just says, they damn sure will be if we don't kill that thing. But Superman's response here, again, is important. He says, we don't even understand what it's doing to them. You could be murdering them all. And Hawkman just says, get out of my way, boy. I will not tell you again. Now, this is the big difference between Hawkman and Superman here, right? Superman becoming the superhero that we know, loss of life is important, right? You can't just run into circumstances like this willy-nilly, having no clue what you could be imposing on other people in terms of danger, collateral damage, different things like that. So caution is the name of the game. They don't know what they're dealing with. But Hawkman is reckless. He has a disregard. It doesn't really matter to him whether or not people live or die. It's just, let's take this thing out and then we'll figure it out later, right? Shoot first, ask questions later, that kind of thing. And that's why he says, open your eyes, kid. This parasite gets its hooks into people. It doesn't let go. And so we have to kill it while we can. But Superman says, you know what this creature is, don't you? You know where it came from. And Hawkman just kind of blows him off, right? I know enough to know that you need to shut up and do what I say. You hear how quiet it's gotten down there. There's no more screams. All we can do is put these poor bastards out of their misery. But Superman intercepts him, right? And it says, we have to find another way. But that's when he realizes the screams have stopped. And that's when he hits on Lois. Because if no one's screaming, Lois isn't screaming. Now again, that connection's not quite there yet, because that romantic connection isn't there yet. Of course, what I'm referring to is the idea that no matter what happens in the world, Superman will save Lois. He always knows what's happening with her in the world at any point in time. That's kind of the nature of the relationship between the two. But at that point, we switch over to Pakistan, and we pick up with absolute Ra's al Ghul, keeping in mind that after the whole Son of the Demon storyline, he was locked away in a prison of a very town that he had spent so much time trying to control, along with his peacemakers, and so he's been in a cell this entire time. Now, one of the most beautiful aspects of this story, or at least what's been happening in Absolute Superman so far, is that instead of killing Ra's al Ghul, he was just supposed to stand trial, and basically was found guilty, as you would expect, and serving time in a prison. Superman would show up and read him the letters of people who had written to him about the kind of things they had experienced under his control. Between that and his lack of access to the Lazarus Pit, he's kind of just reverted into a far more docile state. And so that's when his daughter, Talia, shows up and just says, apologies for the delay, father. I had to figure out a way to distract the farm boy, but it's done. Let's go. Because Talia and her forces are the ones that unleashed Parasite on Metropolis in the first place. But notice this, Ross just says, you shouldn't have come here, Talia. He doesn't immediately say, oh, thank God you've saved me. No. He's effectively a changed man, or in a lot of ways a changed man. At the very least, demoralized, right? He's not the man that he used to be. And that is where, in a lot of ways, Talia kind of taunts him, right? By the Omega, don't tell me the mighty demon's head has been broken by a few months in a third world jail. And that's where he just says, call it what you wish, daughter, but just leave me be. And she tells him, do not worry, father, your spirit can be revitalized just like your flesh. The Lazarus Pit awaits. And his response here, please, no, just leave me here to die. Now, this is a very telling statement, and honestly, I think that you could actually make a credible argument here that Ra's al Ghul never wanted to be the Ra's al Ghul that we see here. Either he was coerced into it, forced into it, whatever the case happens to be. Now, that's not to say that's the absolute truth. It's most likely that he just doesn't want to walk that path anymore, that he's ready to leave that life behind, but he's being asked to return to it by his daughter, which of course he doesn't want to do. But switching back over to Superman, he finally finds Lois, who's basically being contained by Parasite, and of course he effectively rescues her. And that's a crazy thing, and she says, Superman, right? And she says, those people may look like they're sleeping, but inside, I'm telling you, they are trapped in a nightmare. The parasite wants you at your most terrified, your body pumping itself full of adrenaline and endorphins, so it can guzzle your energy like a jug of high-octane gasoline. And Superman just tells her, right, if I was strong enough to pull you free, then I can save the rest of them, right? And Hawkman asks the question, and it's actually a very important and legitimate question here. If this thing absorbs energy, then what happens when it gets its tentacles into you? Right? That thing starts shotgunning Superman juice. There will be no stopping it. And he says, no offense, pal, but I will take you out myself before I let that happen. And Superman just says, no offense, right? In what world is killing me not offensive? But Lois chimes in all this, and she says, That's not how you saved me. You did not tear me free with pure brute strength. It let me go. It spit me out like a bite of something sour because suddenly I was not afraid. I heard your voice and I felt you near. I knew that Superman was there for me, fighting for me no matter what. That's all it took. That is how you saved me. Now, there's two big things to draw from this. The first one is that Lois is starting to form an emotional connection more so than she had to Superman, right? The seeds of this budding romance are starting to take root in the sense that Superman is inspirational. The second thing this means is Superman is absolutely going to blow the back out of Lois Lane at some point. 100%. But all joking aside, Superman simply just says, so all I have to do is make every living thing in Metropolis feel the same way as you, right? Make every living thing feel the same way. And that's what's interesting is because Hawkman chimes in and says, you're talking about 3 million people. Even with your speed, you cannot hold hands and sing Kumbaya with every single one of them. It's impossible. Now, you could look at Hawkman and argue that he's just some kind of a cynic, which he is, but there is also some granules of realism to what he's saying, that it is almost impossible to save millions of people without some of them dying. But that's the kicker about Superman. Where there's a will, there's a way, because hope springs eternal. And that's what he says. Of course it's impossible. Give me 5 minutes. And he races off. And even Hawkman, in talking to Lois, just says, your boyfriend is sure some kind of moron, Lane. But here's the funny thing. She doesn't deny the idea that she sees him as a boyfriend. I mean, she doesn't, but she doesn't reject the romantic connection that they could potentially have, right? So she's kind of feeling him, right? But she says, of course you would say that, Hall. In a world full of crap, you're king crap of the crap mountain. I will make sure he knows who you are, by the way, and every last damn awful thing that you have done. Stay away from him, right? And that's where Hawkman just takes off. And he says, it shouldn't be difficult. In about a minute, he'll be a footnote in history. And when he goes to race off and Lois protests about it, he says, sweetheart, we both know I could give him a day and it wouldn't make a lick of difference. If history has shown us anything, it's that flashes in the pan, like your twinkle-toed Superman, can't even save themselves. And so when Superman shows up here and starts talking to Parasite, right, he just says, I'm Kal-El of Krypton. I don't know if you're hurting these people on purpose or if you're simply just hungry, but it has to stop. But in the middle of that sentence, Parasite grabs him and immediately just starts feeding on him. And when that happens, he just explodes in size, right? Just grows almost instantaneously at astronomical levels. And Hawkman just says, right, like, holy hell, it's even worse than I thought. That thing just tripled in size. How damn powerful is this stupid kid? But that's where Lois just says, Cal, you can do this. You have no idea what sort of effect you have on people. You just have to let them see you for who you are. Simply just be yourself. And so when he's stuck inside Parasite, we actually switch over momentarily to Carter Hall, because he's kind of experiencing his own personal nightmare. Now, we don't see the things that he sees, but whatever it is that he's experiencing, it's enough to torment him. So most likely it's just the regret of the ghost in his closet. And in fact, there's all kinds of skeletons around him. So seemingly all the people he's killed in the name of what is now the Absolute Justice League, albeit having done it for quite some time. And that's why he starts screaming out, right? Like, get away from me, stay back. And Superman arrives on the scene and just says, it's all right, Hawkman, try to relax. Whatever you are seeing, it is not real. And you have nothing to fear, not from the parasite, at least. And so the cool thing here is that when Superman shows up, he shows up as a child, right? Now, we don't know if Superman shows up as a child because that's simply how Hawkman sees him, or that's how Superman sees himself. It's not quite an answer that we get within the confines of this, but I think we can make a logical argument in saying it's Superman and how he sees himself. Because lest we forget, right, Superman's life effectively ended, right, when he was a child, when he was going into adolescence and Krypton exploded. Right, while his life life is literally and tangibly continued on. He's kind of locked at that point in his life. He hasn't quite moved on. He's beginning to, right? He's beginning to become this Superman of this earth and finding his place within the human landscape, but he hasn't quite done it yet. So in a lot of ways, he's still locked in that past. But notice this, right? For all the talk that Hawkman had about how useless Superman was, about how he didn't need Superman or anything like that, suddenly he's very quick to seek him out for aid, right? Tell them to go away. Tell them they had to die. I did it for the greater good. And that's where Superman just tells him, I don't know what you're seeing. I cannot read your mind, but I am trapped in here just like you. Our minds are linked by the parasite's nervous system. So I am here to let you know that you are not alone. And that's where he says, right now, I'm doing the same for all 2,779,388 people inside of Metropolis, not to mention the dogs and cats and pigeons and carp from the Hobbs River and everything. But that's the funny thing, is Hawkman looks at him and just says, look at you, right? You're just a child. You are in so far over your head. You have no idea what this world is, what it does to you. Saints do not survive here, Superman. This world, it's going to break you. But Superman rebukes that entirely and just says, I'm doing my best to assure everyone here that it's going to be all right and they will be fine. But I have a very different message for you, Dr. Hall, and I want you to listen carefully. Now, we do not immediately find out what it is that he says, but what's interesting here is that Carter Hall likes to put himself in this position of a man that, quote unquote, does what needs to be done, right? A man of his own mission, his own volition, that he's really the guy running the show. No, he's not. But Carter Hall is in the passenger seat of his own life. He's a leaf, right? A feather wafting through the winds, being carried around by whatever forces happen to send him in whatever direction they want to send him in. He is every bit as powerless as the weakest human being around him because he's simply just at the behest of whatever forces act on him. Superman is the opposite. It takes a lot of courage to stand in the face of the world, right? To stand in the face of the powers that be and to reject their systems of control. That's huge. It's no small thing. This is what differentiates guys like Superman from guys like Carter Hall. And so when he ends up breaking free from the control of Parasite, it doesn't kill Parasite, but it does liberate everybody in the city. And Carter just says, I don't believe it, right? The kid actually did it. And so it's almost like this Yoda moment, right? That is why you fail. That kind of thing. But notice this, right? People are saying things like, he was there with me, the power of his voice. I knew that everything would be okay. And so Carter asks, right, how the hell did you do that? And Superman just says, I don't really know. It's just that I'm Superman. And so Carter Hall, in hearing this, right, just says, all I heard was mumbling, right? Talk like a man. What did you say? And at that point, you switch back over to Ra's al Ghul, right, where Talia tells him, Father, my distraction will not last forever. We have to go now, at this moment. And so Ra's gives in and says, yes, Talia, I am coming. And he says, apologies, Superman, but we are who we are, and then leaves. So Ra's al Ghul is not that dissimilar from Hawkman, right? Just kind of a product of the world he lives in and isn't really even trying to exercise any control over himself to escape this world. But that's when you end up learning the true nature of Parasite here, right? Where Superman says, the parasite is an alien organism stolen from its homeworld, brought here by Brainiac, kept in a Lazarus lab where they tortured it, trying to weaponize its power. And he just says, I will take it home with me. I'm building a Kryptonian fortress in my barn that should be able to hold it. I will nurse it on controlled distillations of my own energy until I can figure out how to get it back where it belongs. And so when Carter shows up here, right, he says, Superman, I just got to tell you, man, and it almost seems like he's going to say, I'm impressed by you, right? I'm actually impressed by what you did. But Superman doesn't want to hear any of it, right? He's like, I sure as hell am not your son, Hall. And he says, you remember what happened in there and what I said to you. And that's when we go back to that moment where Superman says, I know who you work for, and I want you to give them a message. Lazarus and everyone like them. You tell them that I do not sleep, and nothing they have can hurt me. You tell them my senses stretch for miles, and I am as strong as the sun, and you tell them I am coming. He's literally Kurt Russell from Tombstone, right? Like, you tell them I'm coming, and hell is coming with me, right? And so that's where Carter Hall says, yeah, I remember. And Superman actually parrots a statement back to him. The way of this world was written in stone. That's what you said, like it was something immutable. And he says, afraid of a bit of stone, when all this time you could move mountains. So tell the people you work for that I am not you, Carter Hall. Tell them Superman is not for sale. And so that's when he literally flies off, and Carter Hall contacts Talia and just says, this is Hawkman, we've got a problem. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. I gotta tell you, man, Absolute Superman just keeps getting better and better. This story is incredible. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.